This week we talk about import and export issues, and I want to share with you a quick experience I had while I was doing some work with Costa Rica. So if you go back to the 1990s, Intel established a major manufacturing facility in Costa Rica to manufacture semiconductors. And semiconductors at this point supplanted bananas as the country's #1 industry and soon became 60% of the country's GDP, which is just an enormous number. And this was almost unprecedented in countries where bananas or other agricultural products were a primary industry. So Intel came in and put this in place, and Pat Rayburn, who was the site manager there within a few years, I got to know her quite well, a good friend of mine, and you see her pictured here in the factory, and she would meet with the president of the country weekly for lunch. We were that big of a deal in that country, and in fact the president told her more than once that Intel was responsible directly or indirectly for the jobs of 2 million Costa Ricans and another 1 million Hondurans. So that was the magnitude of the impact on this country. So the factory was ready to begin production, and we began warming up the factory. Again, this is in the late 1990s, and maybe 5% of the factory was up and running, or they're running at maybe 5% of its total output capacity, just to make sure things were working. And quickly got a phone call from the Costa Rica customs officials who said, "What are you doing over there? Your volume is not feasible. There's way too much volume coming through here. You're shutting down our customs office. We can't process this type of volume." And of course our people said, "Well, that's a small fraction of what we're going to be doing here within a few weeks or a few months. So you'd better get ready." So, what do? You've invested all this money in building a factory. You're ready to turn this on, and customs is now your bottleneck, and you can't get your product in and out because of that. So Intel's logistics team stepped in, and really what was lacking, they determined pretty quickly, was hardware and software capability in the customs offices. And because we had dealt with this in other countries, and we essentially knew how to run a customs office better than the country did, we came in and we trained their staff, and we showed them what they needed to actually run it. Now, why was this necessary? Again, the company had greater expertise and resources than a country of fewer than 4 million people. And this is, again, not uncommon, especially as you get into developing countries or small countries. There are a lot of companies out there that have greater resources and greater know-how in a lot of areas than maybe a country does. So one side note on this, also in 2000, I began working on a proposal to double the factory's output in Costa Rica. So that was a fascinating experience. I was just a few years out of MBA school. I started working with some of these international factories and quickly came up with an idea of how we could double the output of that factory in Costa Rica. So I spent a lot of time there, got to know the people there quite well, and then of course they did expand the factory. So a great example of the kind of thing you can find yourself doing not too many years removed from business school. So your futures likely include some exciting opportunities. And of course this week there is a trivia question. What was the largest industry in Costa Rica before Intel began manufacturing semiconductors there? And the answer is bananas. So please go in on the link and put your answer down as bananas, and you will get extra credit. Thanks.